The Declaration of Independence is viewed by many to be one of the most important documents in both American and political history. Conceived in 1776 by those who became known as the Founding Fathers, it declares independence from the British Crown and demands fundamental human rights. Looking at the document, certain words pop out at readers. The writers capitalize words such as rights, life, liberty, happiness, and safety, as well as words such as despotism and tyranny, in order to emphasize their importance as well as to make them distinguishable in the text. Once you begin reading, it is easy to notice trends. Men and people are juxtaposed against government quite often in order to stress the conflict between those two factions. The author calls upon the authority of God, appealing to the piety of the people of the states as well as that of the British Crown. Concrete sentences as well as repeating syntax emphasize key points, such as the right of the people and the tyranny of government. The final paragraphs appeal to logos, explaining how the colonists have exhausted all other available options. Finally, a few motifs arise in the text. The colonists claim that they, as well as all human beings, hold certain rights allotted to them by a higher power. They also claim that government's duties are to protect these rights, and finally, that the British government failed in this duty, giving them cause for rebellion.
The Universal Declaration of Human Rights borrows elements from the American Declaration of Independence. These elements include its declaration of the basic rights of people, formal addressing of issues and grievances that were raised and were the reason for the declaration itself. Then, they both state the course of action that must be taken in order to deal with these grievances. Both documents refer to the unalienable rights that all men share. This is an important reference in both documents because this becomes almost a motif in that this is a recurring theme. To say that these two documents are similar is to make an appropriate argument because this is an aspect unique to these documents. Another similarity between the two documents is in their composition and that they both refer to another fundamental right of human beings, which is to rebel in the midst of a tyrannous and unjust government. Next, they both attend to issues raised that may have been a factor in the creation of both documents. In the Declaration of Independence, the founders begin to list every complaint and grievance that they had with the king that has forced them to take the measures later mentioned in the document. The Universal Declaration of Human Rights doesn't discuss every atrocity or wrong done, but briefly refers to the barbarous acts which have outraged the conscience of mankind. The Declaration of Independence is straightforward in its final address in that the founders of it declare independence, but the Universal Declaration of Human Rights does not have the liberty of being a newly established country, and thus includes a series of articles stating the very rights of human beings. It is ironic that the United States, despite having its Declaration of Independence emulated by the Universal Declaration of Human Rights and being heavily involved in the very creation of the document, it does not follow all the principles that the document is founded on. For instance, we can see a contradiction in the values of the United States and the actual policy of it. In its violation of Article 13 pertaining to the right of people to leave a country that is his own or to go to his own. A great example of this violation and prominent issue within U.S. politics is in its continued funding of the prison-esque detainment center of Guantanamo Bay, where individuals suspected of being connected to terrorism or connected to serious offenses of that caliber are detained without trial. Another violation that the United States is continually criticized for is the continuance of drone strikes in foreign countries, killing American citizens and non-citizens alike, creating tragedies like the death of 178 Pakistani children and more, in which drones frequent in countries like Yemen, Afghanistan, and Somalia.
At the Seneca Falls Convention in New York in 1848, a group of women's rights activists discussed their grievances over the subject of inequality of genders. Elizabeth Cady Stanton created the Declaration of Sentiments, listing these grievances and a series of resolutions of what should be done. This document is significant because it displays the violation of the United States on the rights of women. During this era, women suffered discrimination and unequal rights. In the Declaration of Sentiments itself, Stanton creates a document that very closely resembles the American Declaration of Independence, so as to compare her purpose to the importance of America's beginning. In the introduction and preamble, she uses the same words used by the Founding Fathers almost exactly, only changing a few words to change the purpose and argument. This has the effect of personifying man as the enemy, such as Britain was during the American Revolution, and women as the victims who were righteously after a goal, equality and suffrage. Throughout the denunciation, Stanton uses elements of pathos when she describes the injustices of men who deem women inferior, provide no respect for them, nor allow them to live an independent life. Many logical arguments are stated supporting the overall cause. The resolutions provide a final call to action in the hopes of bringing about change in the government and mindset of the audience, including both the lawmakers of the United States and the general public. Stanton's Declaration of Sentiments is important because it portrays the violation of the fundamental rights stated in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, specifically Articles 1, 2, 3, and 7. These articles all basically protect the rights, freedoms, and equalities of all people, regardless of race or gender. This document is a good example of where the U.S. is at fault in these basic human rights, in which women were discriminated due to gender. This discrimination also led to the loss of rights stated in the Universal Declaration, including equality and even dignity. It was not just for women to have to face such scrutiny and hardship, being constantly abused and held inferior to the tyranny of patriarchy in society. Not only this, but it is illogical, closely resembling the discrimination of the African population, who are just as able as any other, but yet left through slavery, which violates the rights of everyone stated in the Universal Declaration. And as Frederick Douglass said, a slave is a man, and therefore must receive equal treatment as those stated in the Declaration of Independence.
Throughout history, we have seen examples of how the U.S. has violated fundamental rights. Until the mid-1800s, the federal government condoned the practice of slavery. Blacks were held against their will, beaten, killed, and the women raped. In the 1940s, Japanese Americans were rounded up by the military and forced into internment camps. Forced from their homes, their possessions forfeited, Americans of Japanese descent were placed into poor living conditions. For years, they lived in cramped spaces and were faced with compulsory poverty and an overall loss of innocence. In recent years, the U.S. has begun using drone strikes in war. Since the use of these lethal weapons, numerous citizens have been killed. In Pakistan alone, over 176 children have been murdered. In Yemen, a school and health clinic were targeted, killing over 30 people. Only 14 of these were believed to be militants. A father described how when he picked up his daughter from school, it was hit by a missile. The resulting debris crushed his 8-year-old daughter's skull. According to the Declaration of Independence, all humans deserve life, liberty, and happiness. Are slavery and internment not the opposite of liberty? Does the murder of children contradict the Founding Fathers' demand for life? If the God of the colonists truly gives us these rights, would he approve of such heinous actions? Clearly, the United States, despite its demand of and claim to uphold basic human rights, is one of the world's worst human rights offenders in recent history.